Welcome to the Veteran Spouse Network podcast, brought to you in collaboration with Coming Home Well. I'm your host, Hannah O'Brien, both a veteran spouse and the program manager for the Veteran Spouse Network. On each episode of our show, I will host different guests to learn more about the stories, unmet needs, and resources available to our military and veteran families. We're the show that's making space for your stories, so that here you know you're never alone. Welcome back to the Veteran Spouse Network podcast. While we've tackled many topics on this podcast, one we haven't touched on yet is finances. Finances can be a triggering word, and we know that finances are certainly one of the hottest topics for couples that can most often lead to conflict. And because it's such a hot topic, it's all too easy for us to shy away from. But the reality is financial stress can be crippling for families, which is why I'm so grateful to have two guests joining me this month from Operation Homefront to discuss some of the financial hardships our community faces, what we can do about it, and most importantly, how Operation Homefront can help. So today I'm joined by Tonya Galvez, who currently serves as a senior financial counselor with Operation Homefront. Having been a military spouse for 13 years, she understands firsthand how military families can be impacted by financial stress. And joining her is Rose Wilson, a military spouse who first came to Operation Homefront looking for assistance for her own family, only to fall in love with their mission and join the team as a financial assistance caseworker. Ladies, I'm so excited to have you both here today to discuss this important topic, and I'd love to turn it over to you to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourselves, both in terms of your connection to this community, but also how you're serving this community. So off to y'all.
Thank you for having us, Hannah. A little bit more about me. I am, as you had mentioned, I was a military spouse for 13 years. And part of the reason that I wanted to work for Operation Homefront was because during those 13 years, I went through all of the typical financial issues that military families face, particularly active duty families, going to duty stations where it's difficult for a spouse to find employment. It's difficult when the military member is going on multiple deployments and somebody has to be there for the kids. I had a special needs kid myself who had a crazy therapy schedule 4 days a week, which made it impossible for me to work. And in the area where we lived, resources for spouses to work were very scarce. So we went through every financial issue imaginable. It really tested us. It tested our marriage at the time. And that's really what inspired me to want to work within this community, being able to give back, because I noticed if I was going through it, I had friends that were going through it as well. And when there's so many of us going through it, we need to pool together as a community, pool our resources, lean on each other. And that's what inspired me to become a financial counselor. And I got connected with Operation Homefront, first as a caseworker, and then I had the privilege of starting the financial counseling program in-house, which we now run. And we provide financial counseling services to our service members and their family members who go through our critical financial assistance program.
Wow, so exciting that you got to stand it up, and I can't wait to hear more about all the work that y'all are doing. Rose, I'd love to turn it over to you.
Hi. So like you mentioned, I I guess I'm not anymore because he's now retired, but I have been with my husband for 26 years. He served all of that and dealt with multiple deployments. Did find Operation Homefront on his second Iraq deployment in 2009 when I, long story short, found out that my sewer main collapsed to my house. And in calling around to different plumbers and contractors, not really knowing where to start because I didn't know what was wrong, I found out it indeed collapsed, and the city said it was my responsibility to repair it. And then, I wasn't a young kid. I knew, let's get some prices, let's get some contractors. The problem came in is that because likely I was a woman making the phone calls, I was getting prices anywhere from $2,000 to $12,000. Which is a huge gap for one job. I just started doing some Google searching because at the time I was the family readiness person because there was nobody else helping me for my husband's unit. And I found Operation Homefront by a Google search and called up, came to visit me because the gal that was running it was literally a couple of blocks from my house. And she started making some phone calls and ended up getting everybody here at my house to get all the repairs done. They were actually done as in-kind to Operation Homefront. So at the end of the day, I had a brand new sewer line and, gift card to replace some things that were damaged by all the raw sewage coming into my house. And just, I told her at that time, I said, once the house gets put back together, I'm yours. Like, you need help, I'm here for the mission. And I haven't left yet.
Well, that's powerful.
Yeah.
And glad they could help you. That sounds
a
horror fest. Yeah.
It was a mess.
I bet. Oh, well, sounds like y'all are perfectly situated to do the jobs that you do. You're certainly perfectly situated to help us talk about this topic. I know both of you kind of mentioned some of the things that families are facing. But what, like today, when y'all are seeing families, what do you see to be some of those like unique stressors or challenges related to finances for our military families?
On the financial counseling side of things, I get the opportunity to go a little bit more in depth with them than our caseworkers do, since our caseworkers' primary concern is making sure they're getting their needs met. If they have a bill that they're up for a utility disconnect, that's going to take priority versus, not necessarily figuring out what the next steps are. That's where I get to go a little bit more in depth with them. And I'm finding that overwhelmingly, what military families are running into right now is the lack of opportunity to bring in additional income. And I think that's unique to the military community. Of course, civilians face that as well, but it's really unique to the military community because of what I described earlier that I lived through myself on the active duty side, being at a duty station that doesn't have a lot of job opportunities, career advancement for spouses. The military member is gone a lot, rendering the person back home not really able to hold down a job full time because they don't really have any choice other than to hold down the fort. They're going to have to take care of their family primarily. So there's a lack of opportunity for income at that level, not to mention service members themselves. They have to check with their command. They have to make sure that they can have a second job if more income is needed and the spouse can't work for whatever reason. So there's another layer kind of hindering that. On the veteran side, I'm seeing a couple of different things. First and foremost, many of our veterans are on a fixed income. They only have their VA income. They might have Social Security. They might have CRSC pay, but that's it. They're limited because they can no longer work due to their service-connected disabilities. There's more opportunity for spouses to work unless they have to provide a caregiver role to the service member. So all of these combined, whether active duty, whether veteran, what I am seeing a lot of on the financial counseling side is lack of ability to bring in additional income just because of the circumstance that they're currently in. And we all know life has gotten very, very expensive over the last few years. So those, especially the fixed sources of income, they're not increasing quite at the rate year over year that inflation is increasing. So every year there's collectively less buying power, but life still costs money. The cost of food, the cost of housing, it's all still going up. So that's one of the biggest things that I'm seeing on the financial counseling side of things. Rose, on the caseworker side, what are you seeing?
The inability to manage just the inflation that has taken over. Utility bills are astronomical right now, and without the income for the veteran side, actually, because you had mentioned the inability to bring in additional income, is there's just no more money coming in. So how do we work with the utility company? They end up doing repayment plans, which then by the end of the year, they're still owing money. There's just the day-to-day struggles with the inflation. And the same for the active duty side. Like Tonya had mentioned, military spouse often cannot work because of the military member going on deployments and missions and just their schedules, that it's not as if the service member could go out and get a second job in the evening, like maybe a civilian would be able to.
No, that all makes sense with, how things are shaking out these days. Just again, life, right? And then as you're talking about the unique circumstances for this community or some of those restrictions to a second income. I'm curious, honestly, this is the self-motivated question. As someone who's about to have a second kid, and childcare costs are ridiculous. Is that something you'll hear much about? Like can't afford childcare and are able to support in any way?
All the time.
Yep.
All the time. Yeah. And a lot from the active duty side is that often we'll see where the spouse doesn't have a higher level of education. So for them to go out and find a job, it's not going to be a top paying job where it just doesn't make sense because the child care is more expensive than the income that they're going to be bringing in, and all the extras of then leaving the house. Now you're packing extra food, or you're buying food out, or the extra gas to get to daycare and then to the job. And not and that's the same for the veterans as well, actually, though. So childcare is a huge deterrent.
Yeah, and I wonder, thinking too from like our programming side of like helping spouses, like, realize all the things that they want, and just like having that reality of like, I might want a job, I might want a career, I might want this purpose, but the reality of the finances mean it's more expensive to get the job than it is to work the job.
And that's one of the many reasons that military spouses tend to be unemployed or underemployed. I know when my daughter was old enough to start school, just here on a personal note, and I was able to rejoin the workforce, I was able to find a remote position. I was severely underemployed. I was working way below my skill level, the prior pay grade that I was at my prior career track employment before we had to move and relocate to an area that did not have a lot of spouse jobs or career advancement available. And so because of all of these factors, moving a lot, childcare costs, spouses do tend to be unemployed or underemployed. They may have to take an underemployed position because it does bring in some income, but it allows them to work in the evening so their military member spouse can take care after duty hours of their children. And that job may not be working up to their skill level or their skill set that they would otherwise be working outside of military life.
Yeah, so many factors contributing to these decisions. That again, others in the civilian community may be facing their own versions of this, of course, but it is unique. You guys have mentioned, and I know when we talked and prepped for this, that like you're seeing that a pretty steep increase in requests for housing, utilities, rent, food, those sorts of things. I was curious just how recent that been. How have you all seen those requests go up over time? And like we talked a little bit about inflation, but other things you think might be contributing to that increase in requests for that assistance?
Certainly the economy, especially since we've entered into the pandemic. We're seeing, I don't necessarily know that we're seeing a higher number of like unique requests than we have been. Of course, over time that those trends do tend to go up, but I wouldn't say it's anything necessarily substantial, but the amount of each request is certainly increasing. As Rose mentioned, the cost of utilities is sometimes astronomical. When I look back to when I was a caseworker, when I first started here, I've been at Operation Homefront for 7 years. The first 2.5 years I worked as a caseworker, I would typically see mortgage payments on the high end being maybe $2,500, $3,000 a month. but now it's almost like that's a starting number with today's economy, with how the housing market has changed over the last 5 to 7 years since I first started here as a caseworker. So now it's like, okay, $2,500 is more of a minimum that we're going to see on 1 month worth of mortgage payment. And kind of the same for food. Food has gone up so drastically. We're seeing more and more requests for food being added to each application. Maybe they came to us for mortgage assistance, but it turned out that after the caseworker talked with them, they identified a need for food as well, and there were other needs present. So definitely the dollar amount of things has increased substantially. I attribute that 100% to the economy. I mean, if we just look at what prices of everything were 5 to 7 years ago versus now, auto payment requests as well. It's not unusual to see those nowadays, upwards of $700. Some are $1,000 for our families that need a vehicle that can seat, maybe 7 or 8, their vehicle payments. It's not unusual for those to be up over $1,000 a month. Whereas if I look back to when I started here in 2017, I think our auto payment requests were more in the $300 to $700 area. So that I would certainly attribute that completely to the economy and how that's changed over time.
I agree.
Yeah, that's wild, but also sounds right with just living life and what we're seeing. And honestly, I hope, even like thinking about some of my own stuff, I'm like, oh, that's normalizing. Doesn't change the reality, but it is normalizing of that. We're all facing these huge increases. And I hope, if nothing else, it makes sense to be struggling, when that's happening, and then all these other barriers to getting to employment, happen, then it's hopefully I'm hoping maybe people have less shame and stigma around financial struggles when we hear we're all facing this, not because of something we, budgeted poorly, necessarily. But anyway, let's see. I really love, as an organization whose focus is super spouse, family focused, any other organization where they're really focused on the family, and you guys certainly are. And I think especially when you're talking about finances, like that's a family challenge, like that's going to affect every single member of a family. So I just want to hear more about like what it means to y'all to like address it as a family, as opposed to just what sometimes we see of like, oh, we're helping the service member, we're helping the veteran. What does that mean to y'all to support the family?
Absolutely. On the financial counseling side of things, I often get to work with both the service member and the spouse. It's not required for both of them to participate. I can work with one or the other. But I always like it when I have spouses that are on the call together, because it allows me an opportunity to see how they interact with each other about finances. I'll know right away if it's more of a hostile situation between the two of them, or if they're both kind of open to each other's ideas. It's really important because financial issues are the number 3 reason that couples get divorced. So it ranks really high up there. And I think that in my position as financial counselor, I have the ability to kind of get a little bit more insight into that. Our caseworkers will tend to work with one or the other, maybe not both at the same time the way that I do, but it allows me that perspective. And if I can kind of gauge how well they're bouncing off of each other in terms of how they speak to each other when it comes to finances, I might be able to give them some additional tools that they can put in their toolkit. If they're poor communicators, we can talk a little bit about how they can better communicate, maybe start having a monthly meeting or a weekly meeting to discuss finances. Very often, and this is not unusual at all, in any couple, one may be a spender, one may be a saver. So how do we get them to find a common ground? We have some strategies that we'll talk about, just kind of see what's worked for them in the past, what hasn't worked for them, where the key challenges may be, because quite often it comes down to communicating. And everybody was raised differently. Everybody was not raised in the same household. So everybody is already going to have that kind of fundamental foundation of how they approach finances based on how they were raised, what was taught to them, if anything was taught to them. I do hear frequently, and especially from my younger families that I work with, I very often hear, nobody taught me this. We might have done a quick 1-week unit in school, but my parents didn't teach me this. I didn't have any financial role models. I just feel like I'm kind of floundering here. And that really gives me an opportunity to be able to dig in with them to not only help them understand financial literacy at a higher level, but also to help them communicate with each other so that they can work through these issues together versus against each other.
I love that. And you maybe kind of even have spoken to what I was going to ask next, which is what y'all work with them on, or even just tips. Maybe, maybe Rose, you don't get to have these conversations as often, but just recommendations and things for, like, you guys are often seeing them in the emergent situation, right? Like we have a need, we need this need met now. But what kind of can families, individuals, couples do to kind of help them get upstream of some of this stuff? And I mean, you pointed out some amazing ones for couples, right? Communication, getting on the same page, but anything else either of y'all wanted to highlight to just kind of either resources that y'all have available for that type of upstream work, or just tips and things you've picked up and learned along the way?
Well, I always tell my families that prevention starts now. They're already kind of in the middle of a financial hardship, but anything that they can do to prevent future hardship. And that goes for anybody who may be listening to this who's not in a financial hardship today. Prevention starts now. And what that entails is making sure you have your budget in check, you're tracking all of your monthly household expenses, you're working to live within your means, you're establishing financial goals, and those will often include paying down debt, establishing an emergency fund. One of the most common financial goals that my families convey to me is, I want to buy a house. And we always have to have a chat because we hear, VA loan, 0 down, great pathway to homeownership. But I need to make sure that they're thinking of the bigger picture. It's not just the mortgage payment, and the mortgage payment is not just your principal and interest. If this is a new build, in about a year, you can expect extra property taxes if you have to pay them. Some of my 100% disabled veterans don't have to pay them. We need to think about homeowners insurance and how that's going to increase over time. We need to think about, what is your plan if something goes wrong? If a hailstorm blows through and your roof is damaged, how are you going to pay for that? Insurance will likely cover it if it's a covered event, but you're still going to have to pay your deductible. Are you going to be able to save for your deductible? So I'm oftentimes discussing with families what the bigger picture looks like. And there's a pathway to homeownership. There's steps, I call them baby steps or stepping stones, that need to be put into place beforehand. Do you have an emergency fund? Do you have your debts paid off? Especially if you want to qualify for a mortgage, they're going to do a deep dive into your credit. They're not going to like if you have collection agency debts. They're going to ask that you get those resolved. These are all things that people can work on now to kind of prevent future financial hardship as a pathway so that they can work on their goals. And I always say that starts right now. And then just reaching out to the community. If you are already in a financial hardship, reach out. There's a ton of resources out there. Reach out at the local level. I always recommend reaching out locally at the United Way, because they probably have a lot of programs that we may not know about here at the national level that can serve you within your own community. And then, of course, Operation Homefront is a resource. We have a lot of different types of programs. We do family event programs like our Back to School Brigade, Star Spangled Babies. We have our holiday meals for military families, our annual toy drive. We have so many events that our military families can sign up for. We have, of course, our critical financial assistance program that Rose and I work in if you're really in a bind. And then we do have kind of longer term resiliency programs like our housing programs that inventory is online. People can apply for if they're eligible for our program. So if you're not in a financial hardship, Prevention is the key. Start right now. Start working on those financial goals. If you're already in a financial hardship, reach out to your community and then draft a plan forward so that you can prevent that again in the future.
Rose, any hot tips on top of that?
On top of Tonya is amazing. You know what? I one thing I tell all of my clients that I work with is, don't be afraid to ask for help. That's what we're here for. If it's just a matter of you need to just figure out a resource or get a little help, a little hand up, Operation Homefront is amazing. A great place to start, as Tonya had mentioned, with some of our other programs. My early years with Operation Homefront, I worked at the field office level. I had the opportunity to organize and attend and hand out backpacks full of school supplies or the holiday meals, a baby shower, and it's the morale in itself, just being around other military families, especially for, my family being Army Reserve, we're nowhere near a military base whatsoever. Day to day, we didn't know another military family at all. So getting to some of those events and being around, other military families, it helps with the morale, and you're sharing stories with each other and, resources they may have. Just ask. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, reach out. No, I especially love all y'all's holiday events. We love to push those out because it's like, and I wasn't even thinking about what you were highlighting of the opportunity to connect, which is so great. Anything else? I mean, I know whether it's on the work that you guys do with your financial programming or anything else you want to make sure people know about this program, anything Operation Homefront offers, and how to get connected with y'all.
I would say keep engaged with our social media channels first and foremost. Anytime there's an event like our holiday meals for families, back to school brigade, the link to registration will be announced through our social media channels first. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're in all of the big three is what I call them. Information about housing inventory. Sometimes they'll release new homes that are available. So there will be a link to the website where you can apply for one of our housing programs. Critical financial assistance, those applications are going to be open from the 1st to the 10th of every single month. So that's kind of rolling throughout the entire year. And that's really the best way to get involved with or engage with our programs. To keep an eye on us on social media, check out what our announcements are, keep an eye on our website, and that's going to get you the best connected with us as possible.
I love the how. The how is helpful. And love that y'all have active socials, because I think that's so helpful just to know like what's going on and have that regular communication. Yeah, we're all on them, right? Well, also, I think you guys gave a lot of great wisdom and advice, but I do always like to end my podcast by just saying, all right, so we may have people listening who, and you've already kind of spoken to different folks who may be like, oh gosh, you're talking about me. I am in that kind of emergent need, or I'm not, but maybe I haven't thought about some of these things that y'all are talking about. So any from either of you, any kind of final pieces of wisdom or advice when it comes to managing financial stress, preparing, setting yourself up for success, any of that?
I always say, remember the 3 Ps. And the 3 Ps are going to be to plan, prioritize, and be proactive. So planning, I kind of touched on that earlier, kind of just plan now to prevent something to happen later on. Get your budget under control, work on establishing an emergency fund, establish a plan to repay debt, try not to get into any more debt if at all possible. Those are kind of the stepping stones for any future financial goal that anybody could possibly have moving forward. That's going to elevate their financial position immediately, is to put these particular ideas into place. And in planning, just make sure you're prioritizing critical household expenses. If you are in a bind, make sure that you have your housing paid, make sure you have your vehicle paid. That's what's going to get you to and from work. That's your bread and butter. Any unsecured like credit card debt that's not secured to any particular type of asset. If you're really in a bind, let that go. Your credit is always going to be recoverable at some point on down the road when you're in a better financial position. And I would rather you have your house over your head and a bad credit score, or I'm sorry, your roof over your head and a bad credit score than flawless credit and, homeless. And then the final P of that is to be proactive. And that kind of piggies back off of that. If you're in a hardship, be proactive. Reach out to your lenders, reach out to your vendors, see if you're eligible for payment deferrals, see if you're eligible to go on budget billing, and reach out to organizations. I can't stress that enough. There's a lot of organizations out there that are ready and willing to help military families. Always check your eligibility first. Don't waste time filling out applications for anything you're not eligible for, because I always say time is our most valuable asset that we have. So use yours accordingly. But be proactive, reach out to your community, your lenders, your vendors, let everybody know you're having a hardship, and see what you can do to kind of help mitigate that until you're back on your feet.
Love that. Easy. 3 P's. Rose, any final pieces of advice for our listeners?
How do you top Tonya?
I know. Yeah, she said.
I love her.
Rose, you always have amazing wisdom.
I can only reiterate, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like that's the one big thing that I hear from clients all the time is like, I'm so embarrassed to be filling out this application. We're not judging you. Some of us have walked in your shoes. We're here for you. That's the purpose of Operation Homefront. Never be afraid to ask for help.
I think that's perfect. So it does address, right? There is shame, attached to this topic for sure. But most of us have been there or
Yes.
have taken these steps Tanya's talking about to ensure that we haven't been. So we all are dealing with this at some level and even when you're set up, things can happen.
Yeah. Life can sideswipe you. When I found Operation Homefront, we weren't young. So, we bought a new to us car that was running perfectly. And, we were going to have car problems, knock wood. And, my husband took care of the house and stocked everything that I was going to need. And then he left in November. December, I had electrical problems that we could have never have known would ever happen. Took care of it, no problem, because, small problem, couple $100, we'll take care of it, whatever. And then when the sewage started backing up into the house, I went into panic mode. Together we have 5 kids. What in the world am I going to do with 5 kids and my washer and dryer are in the middle of sewage? So as much as we prepared, Murphy's Law of Deployment hit us, and and I was still okay until they started giving me the prices from $2,000 to $12,000. Like, how does it jump that big? So yeah, I was so thankful I found Operation Homefront. Literally life changing.
Yeah, and you're right. When it rains, it pours, and that's
Yes.
just always how it is. And
Yep.
You could be as prepared as you possibly could be, but.
Well, and I think that's important to highlight is no matter how much you do the 3 Ps to plan and prioritize and be proactive, life still happens and it's always going to happen. And we can't possibly plan for every single financial disaster that we're ever going to experience. But the better prepared that you are, the more likely it is you'll be able to navigate it with, as minimal additional hardship that it can create as possible. So I think that's something that's really important to highlight there. And something I hear time to time from some of my families I work with is they're kind of hesitant to set financial goals because it's always, well, what if I can't meet this goal? That's okay. Goals are fluid and life happens. We can always do a course correction to different goals if life throws us a curveball, but have something in the future that you're working toward, whether it's debt payoff, whether it's savings, whether it's just general financial stability. Maybe they've come to us, they've lost their job, they don't have any way to pay their rent for the foreseeable future. It's still important to have those goals so that it kind of gives them a pathway to be motivated and stay motivated to get back on track and make that course correction. We're never locked into those goals. They're always something that we can pivot away from if we need to, because of the changes life throws at us.
Yeah. And like you said, it helps us think about where we want to be, how to get there. Certainly nothing good comes from burying our head in the sand, especially with finances. That's when we're gonna run into a bunch of trouble. And then, like you both said time and time again, but knowing where to reach out when you have those moments. So that again, it's okay, well, yes, this is unforeseen. I was hoping not to get here. I'm here. At least I know where to go. At least I know I'm not gonna have to tackle this on my own. So I'm so grateful we got to hopefully introduce a bunch of people to y'all as a resource, so that they know they have a place to go. And I'm just grateful to tackle this topic, because again, I do think it's one we all battle, and often are battling on our own, sometimes even in our own relationships or marriages, if we're not talking about it and having those important conversations. So hopefully hearing from y'all has helped people think about some things that they can do, and hopefully they connect with y'all for some of this support. So I want to thank you both. And hopefully everyone got a little something out of today. I know I certainly did, even things to think about as we have our second kid on the way, and we're new homeowners, so we're facing all these things. I'm certainly right there with all of y'all. But thank you both. I really appreciate you guys. That's all I have for y'all. If y'all have anything else, I never like to cut anybody off.
Thank you for having us, Hannah, allowing us this opportunity to speak about these issues, because they do definitely affect everyone within the veteran community, the active duty, anyone in the military community. I think I can speak for Rose. She'll speak for herself, but I'm pretty sure I can say confidently that we are both very privileged to be able to work here in the positions that we do and be able to serve this community, because it's very rewarding. And I'm a person who, I love to hear people's stories. I love to hear where they've been, how they got to where they are today, and where they want to go tomorrow. And I think being able to work in this particular space really allows us to connect with our families on that exact level.
Definitely agree with you. And I love working with our families, and being able to guide them through the application process the way it was done for me.
Yeah, and honestly, the way you described, it was like, oh my God, someone came to your house. I can't imagine how amazing that must have been in that moment. So that's who you guys are dealing with, when you come and take care of, or get in touch with these folks in this amazing program.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a much bigger organization now, so I'm not showing up on anybody's door to help them.
But that level of passion, that level of wanting to support.
Rest assured, I will be making those phone calls. And I literally just worked with a family, and the veteran said to me, he was like, "Thank you so much for staying on top of me." He's just so frustrated that he's in the position that he's in for no reason or anything that he did. And the fact that I continued to call him, he said, he did try with other organizations, but nobody stayed in contact with him like I had done. And I said, when I said I'm here for you, I'm here for you.
And that's huge, because too often we hear the other experience.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. And for those of y'all listening, we hope you learned a lot, and we hope to have you back next month to learn about all sorts of new things and organizations and resources available. See you next time. Thanks again for joining us on the Veteran Spouse Network podcast, brought to you in collaboration with Coming Home Well. We thank you for listening today, and hope today's session left you feeling a little more connected or gave you some insight into the experiences of our military and veteran families. Don't forget to check us out at veteranspousenetwork.org to learn more about how our military and veteran families can receive the support they deserve.